Good morning, and welcome everybody to this social value workshop by Go for Growth this morning. It's lovely to have so many of you joining us today. We have got a number of people booked on the session, so I'll just go through if I can get my teeth in, I'll just go through some introductions, the agenda for today, and some housekeeping as people are joining us. So if you have been to a Go for Growth webinar before, you might already know who I am. For those that are joining us for the first time, my name is Gillian Askew. I'm one of 3 co-founders of Go for Growth, and we are a social enterprise dedicated to marketplace development, helping to connect the public sector, commissioning and contracting authority, procurement communities with the very talented marketplace, focusing especially on smaller organisations, micro sole traders, smaller organisations and the voluntary sector. We've got a lot to try and cover in today's session, as always. So what I will say is, if you want to chat with me in more detail about anything that we go through today, please do feel free. Also, we're on Zoom, and so the Q&A functionality and the chat functionality are both enabled. So please do feel free to ask any questions or create some discussion as we go through. Please feel free to do that. I have carved out some time for questions at the end, but please don't feel you have to wait. As you can see on the screen, the session is being recorded today, and what we'll send out, usually within 48 hours, is a copy of the recording and a copy of the slide deck that I'm using today. If there are any live links in there, they will come out to you as live links as well, so that you'll be able to point out to other information if that's appropriate. You will also be able to find a copy of the recording on our YouTube channel as well. So what we're covering today is thinking about social value. We'll be thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, thinking about how you develop your own social value narrative and demonstrating social value in bids and what's required. And then we've just got one slide at the end on the TOMs, which are themes, outcomes and measures, which we'll cover also. So if we start by thinking about headline legislation, the Public Services Act of 2012 was assented to law and came into force on the 31st of January 2013. So it's not a new piece of legislation. We are, of course, April 2025. So we're in excess of 12 years into this legislation now. What it does is it enshrines in law things like it requires people who commission public services to think about and consider how they can also secure wider social, economic and environmental benefits for the communities in which they serve and on a national basis also. And it requires contracting authorities, before they start the procurement process, so right in the commissioning phase, actually, to think about whether the services that are going to buy or the way that they're going to buy them could secure those benefits for their area or for their stakeholders or for ultimately the service users of whatever the goods and services are. And so the Act is a tool really to help procurement and commissioners get more value for money out of the procurement process. It encourages procurement and commissioners to talk to their local provider market or the local business community, voluntary sector community, to help design better services in from inception, often thinking about how we could find new or more innovative solutions to what can sometimes be complex and challenging issues or needs statements. We've also got something called the National Procurement Policy Statement, which I'll cover in a second, but all of this together is thinking about some real core elements like creating new business, helping businesses to grow, thinking about how we retain and create new jobs and how we develop the skills of the marketplace. And we should do that alongside the agenda of tackling climate change, thinking about how we deal with our waste. And as part of that, We need to do more on supplier diversity. We need to encourage underrepresented groups to be able to take part in opportunities. So we need equity of opportunity in the really broad supply chain diversity sense. And we also, in the wake and the shadow of the global pandemic, we also need to think about resilience. We need to think about that from a planetary perspective, but also from a business perspective. And so the National Procurement Policy Statement, and it's important actually, before I get onto the NPPS, is just to remind bidders and also my colleagues in procurement that this isn't always about the lowest price. We need to take a broad view of what value for money actually means in that specific procurement and commissioning sense. So we'll think about that at macro level, but we'll also think about that at micro level. So what are we buying? Why are we buying it? And what would value for money look and feel like in the context of this particular goods and services procurement? And so the National Procurement Policy Statement, you are probably aware that we had a change in regulations on the 24th of February. So new procurements that are going out into the market are governed by the Procurement Act 2023. We will have frameworks and dynamic purchasing systems that are still live and contracts that are still in place that were let before the 24th of February this year that are governed by the Public Contract Regulations of 2015, the European regs. We have both now at play, and when the Procurement Act 2023 came into force, the National Procurement Policy Statement was also updated. There is a link, this is a live link here that will take you to the National Procurement Policy Statement in and of itself, and this is also a live link, which I'll talk to you about in a second. What does it do? It sets out effectively the strategic priorities for public procurement and how contracting authorities can support their economic, social and environmental requirements locally. So it talks about in carrying out a procurement covered by the Act, a contracting authority must have regard to the importance of delivering value for money. Achieving value for money is always the overarching priority in public procurement, and this must include consideration of outcomes and quality to avoid waste from low value, poor quality bids. This means optimizing the use of public funds by balancing effectiveness, efficiency and economy over the life cycle of the product, service or works to achieve the intended outcomes of the procurement. And this includes the wider socio-economic and environmental benefits and impacts. And you can see on the slide the five core aims. So we can see that we are talking about kickstarting economic growth, making Britain a clean energy superpower, managing safety on our streets, breaking down barriers to opportunity and building an NHS that's fit for the future. It goes on to say in the National Procurement Policy Statement that contracting authorities can deliver value for money by, and I'm quoting this, driving economic growth and strengthening supply chains by giving small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and voluntary community and social enterprises, VCSEs, a fair chance, creating high-quality jobs and championing innovation, delivering social and economic value that supports government missions, including by working in partnership across organisational boundaries where appropriate, and ensuring the right commercial capability and standards are in place to procure and manage contracts effectively and to collaborate with other contracting authorities to deliver best value. And under that kickstarting and driving economic growth, the National Procurement Policy Statement actually says there is a priority for contracting authorities to drive economic growth and strengthen supply chains by giving SMEs and VCSEs a fair chance at public contracts. And so there is a real undercurrent under the National Procurement Policy Statements that actually creating that accessibility, that equity of opportunity in and of itself is social value. And so there is a real drive to break down those barriers to entry. There has been something called PPN 001, which is about SME and VCSE procurement spend targets. That was released in February 25. That mandates that all central government departments, their executive agencies and non-departmental public bodies to set a 3-year target for direct spend with SMEs and a 2-year target for direct spend with VCSEs to be achieved in the financial year ending March 2028 and to publish results annually. And whilst the targets are voluntary for the wider public sector, we will be interested, I think, to see how many public sector organisations do set those direct spend targets under the banner of social value for SMEs and VCSEs. Widening participation is not a new agenda, but what we hope to see is that many public sector organisations will get on board with this so that we can actually really drive supplier diversity and social, economic, local impact through actually working with SMEs. So it's a great time to be a smaller organisation or a voluntary sector organisation in the public sector. And you know, if what I'm saying is resonating, I guess the message is that, excuse me, this is a really important agenda for the public sector. And we are seeing weightings of upwards of 10% in procurements. And so competitions can be won and lost based on social value contribution. And the position, I guess, that we're in as bidders and providers to the public sector, where social and environmental impact is concerned, it's not an if we can do it. Really, it's about how we do that and how much we can do that. But the language isn't always easy. Sometimes the language in and of itself can be confusing. There are multiple terminologies that are used. You can see them on the screen. The language has been changing and shifting over the years. The headline term in public sector is social value. And under social value, all of these other things will really be at play. For example, public sector organisations are anchor institutions. Generally speaking, they're rooted in place and therefore they have a civic responsibility to support their local economy. Circular economy, things like circularity actions are becoming more and more common. And that's as part of our drive to be more sustainable and about thinking about how we use our planetary resources better. So if you're thinking about circularity or circular economy, you'll be thinking beyond recycling into reusing, remanufacturing, thinking about different asset ownership models. For example, you might decide to lease remanufactured IT instead of buying new every time. So that acting responsibly, that social responsibility, environmental responsibility, our behaviours, our responsible business behaviours, our ethical behaviours, they're all really important, and ultimately they're all variations of the theme, and so therefore part of the same whole. The terminology that we'll see that leads the way in public sector is social value. So I don't know if everyone is familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. There are a set of 17 goals which are basically a call for urgent action across both the developing but also the developed world as well. You might not see the Sustainable Development Goals overtly referenced within tender documentation, but there is likely to be some alignment, if not in the foreground, then in the background. You can see that the Sustainable Development Goals have been adopted by all United Nations member states back in 2015. There are targets that sit under the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but they are a recognition of our drive to end poverty and other deprivations, but that activity has to work and align with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, spur economic growth, whilst making actions that tackle climate change and preserve our oceans and our forests. And for example, in a recent tender that we did some training on, actually a local authority in Yorkshire, the contracting authority in their social value section was focusing on their anti-poverty strategy. And what they had done in that tender was provide 4 goals, and they were asking bidders to choose 2 of those goals that they could align to through that contract. And of course, no poverty is goal number 1 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It can often be worth thinking about your own social value approach through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to some examples. What I will say is we don't have to tackle all 17. So this isn't a case of having giant actions that address all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it potentially can be useful if we think about our offer in relation to those Sustainable Development Goals. For example, Go for Growth is aligned with goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, and we're also aligned to the clean energy goal as well. So we have picked out 1 or 2 of those goals that we align most to in our organisation, and our social value contribution usually comes under those kind of headings. So there's something called the social value model that exists in the public sector. It's primarily a guidance for buyers, but it can also be a really useful tool for providers as well. It tells us what the priorities are. So you can see when we were on an earlier slide, those 5 key headings in the National Procurement Policy Statement: kickstarting economic growth, making Britain a clean energy superpower, etc. You can see how those things play out in terms of more detail, but also in terms of activities. So if we think about kickstarting economic growth, for example, we're thinking about fair work, what skills we need for growth, and how we build resilient, innovative, and flexible supply chains. In the clean energy superpower, we're thinking about sustainable procurement practices. And we're thinking about, in building an NHS fit for the future, for example, creating a pipeline of opportunities for the contract workforce, reducing barriers to entry for underrepresented groups. So it all really speaks to how social value can be brought to life. What are the priorities? What's important? And how might we consider it? And how might we reflect that into our procurements? If you go onto the social value model and you can literally put into a search engine social value model, it will bring you up this version. It will also bring you up model assessment criteria. So you can see the guidance that public procurement and commissioners are being given by the government and how they should test and what they can test, and giving some guidance on things to consider in assessment criteria. And as bidders, the more we know about those things, actually, the more benefit and ability we have to be able to structure our social value contributions so that we're able to flow them into those competitions for winning work in the most appropriate way possible. But we often get people often talk to us about, say, smaller businesses, especially, and the voluntary sector. How do I get started? Where do we focus? Where should I put our efforts? You know, in a small business, our resources are at a premium. Our time is at a premium, and often there is an opportunity cost in terms of our core services. And so actually social value has to be about our core services. It has to be about who we are and what we do, and making sense of what we are able to offer for this particular contract, but also in general about our business. We've got in here, and this is a slide that my colleagues in Net Positive Futures use all the time. This is their slide. We talk about the global challenges represented by the Sustainable Development Goals. These global issues form our sphere of concern. They're things that we need to be aware of, but they might lie beyond our direct ability to solve as individual organisations, or even through specific projects. So whilst we acknowledge these larger scale issues, our primary focus should be on where we can make a difference. And that brings us to our sphere of influence. So these are the areas where we can exert meaningful impact. So within the procurement and commissioning process, for example, this sphere is defined by factors such as the subject matter of the contract, the budget, the opportunities that are available through that contract. It's about asking via that contract, what can we influence through this particular project or tender? But for all of us, whether we're in procurement or we're in the marketplace, we actually start with our sphere of control. So these are the aspects that we can directly address and we can directly act upon today. For every project, it's essential to evaluate the environmental, the social, the economic impacts and opportunities, and then choose the most relevant and achievable steps. And we should acknowledge that we can't solve every challenge at once. We are not destined to be able to resolve everything all at the same time, but by taking intelligent and focused action within our sphere of control, we can create positive change. And this is the narrative that we build as an organisation. So we understand the bigger picture, we recognise our limitations, and we focus our efforts on where they matter the most. These actions may be small, and they might not always be economic, they might be environmental, they might take years to fully materialise, but by maintaining that focus gives us that drive to create real impact over time. There was a phrase that my colleague talked about, and it was really about the cumulative effect of small actions over time. And that's what we're trying to do. We might not always be able to be transformational. We might not be able to create a revolution in terms of social impact, but the evolution is just as important. Doing what we can when we can, even if that is smaller actions. So how do we develop our social value contribution? We consider what our business does, and actually some of the advice I would give is about keeping it simple. So if we think about our sphere of control, I'm going to reference a couple of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we'll think about goal number 1, no poverty. We'll think about the things that are important to the business, and we'll think about proportionality. So if we think about goal number 1, 14.5 million people live in relative poverty in the UK. That's 2022 numbers. So 1 in 5 in the population. Relative poverty is calculated where the household income is less than 60% of the median household income. The median income is 31,400, so 60% of that is 18,840, which will be an hourly rate of £9.66 for 37 hours a week, and that's less than minimum wage, which is above that rate. So we might think to ourselves, and if we're answering a bid where poverty is included, like the one I just talked to, we might think about what we can do to contribute to that. What are we doing that contributes to that? Are we paying a fair wage? Are we paying national living wage? Are we accredited to the national living wage? Can we reduce reliance on seasonal contracts? Can we get rid of 0 hours contracts? And what impact would that have if we did that? So by increasing the pay for workers, that can help shift families out of relative poverty and give access to a better standard of living. What do we need from customers in order to do that? And we encourage buyers to take consideration of the flow through of costs and affordability in terms of driving up standards of living, for example. Buyers need to commit to paying a fair price rather than the lowest price. And of course, what we're seeing in the National Procurement Policy Statement and through things like the most advantageous tender rather than the most economic advantageous tender, the way that buyers are driven, we are told that it is not always the lowest price that gives the most value. And so it shouldn't feel like the fastest race to the bottom. We can think about prompt payments in the supply chain as buyers. We can think about how we help our suppliers manage cash flow. And all of that sort of reinforces that point that social value and procurement can live in perfect harmony when we're seeking for that most rounded value for money term. Think about another couple. So goal 4, quality education. What are you doing in your business to support skills development and education in your business? Do you have continued professional development? Do people go on courses? Can they grow and develop their skills over time? Do you operate apprenticeships? Do you support schools with careers days or work experience? Do you have placements in your business? Do you offer graduate placements for higher education students, etc.? So you can think about these goals and think about, actually, are we doing anything? Can we do anything? Should we do anything? Where do we align? And if I think about goal 16, which is for peace and justice, modern slavery is real, and you will see in bids that to be a qualifying commercial organisation, you would be turning over more than 36 million, and you may well not be doing that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking about modern slavery, and doing our bit to ensure that the things we buy as businesses, however small that might be and however low value that might be, can't include trade or geographies where people, including children, could be enslaved. We all have something that we can do to make sure that we are buying ethically and sustainably, regardless of the size of our business. Yeah, so I've just seen a comment that the national living wage is a low bar. Agreed, it is. And yet, I think the sad reality is there are people who are paid at minimum wage and lower than that. There are seasonal contracts, there are 0 hours contracts. So I absolutely agree that these minimums are a low bar, especially in London, when they are designed to relate to the cost of living. But you know, we've been in a cost of living crisis and are still in it and have been for a number of years. And so, you know, salaries haven't caught up. And so, you know, all of that flows through into the procurement. So when you're a procurement professional, like I am, thinking about what you are seeking to put out into the market, what you're buying, we should be thinking very responsibly about what value means and how we can lift communities, you know, and paying fair prices so that fair wages can be paid is a real part of that. So we have something called the SDG mapping tool that you can see on screen. This is just an example of what you might seek to do if you wanted to have a look at the SDGs and use them to help you work out what's relevant to your business. You can see I've used the goal number 1 again, no poverty. So in the top, we've got the UN targets, but then what I've done is work out what does that target mean to us, and by us I mean the United Kingdom. And then I've actually drilled down a bit further. What can we do as a business? So that stuff that I talked about, we can pay a fair wage. We can pay living wage over minimum wage, or actually, as the comment was, that is a low bar. What more can I do? Can I pay higher than that? And how far down the supply chain does that go? So I might be just, you know, one part of a larger supply chain. When I'm buying stuff, am I asking for that through my supply chain? So all employees are being paid a fair wage. And then thinking about what impact will that have? Why would I do that? And how will I measure those benefits over time? So how can I, as a marketplace provider or a buyer, how can I see the impact and track the impact of those things? So you might do this in a different way. You might do it very fluidly in a meeting space, or you can write it down in the way that I have there. But hopefully that is a little bit helpful in terms of thinking about how you might map to the SDGs. So what are some examples of social value that you might think about? And this is by absolutely no means an exhaustive list. This is really just scratching the surface, but at fairly high level. So things like volunteering in local community projects, we often find that organisations in their businesses, and businesses are a very human thing because they're made up of people. We often find that in businesses, their employees are doing lots of great socially impactful stuff, but the business doesn't necessarily know about it because they don't ask about it. So you might have, if you've got 10 employees in your business, half of them, all of them, one of them, two of them, however many, might well be doing lots of volunteering. So I have a volunteering role. I sit as a trustee on a multi-academy trust that's made up of predominantly special educational needs schools. That's my volunteering contribution. And in our little business, each one of our directors has a voluntary role that we undertake, and we encourage and allow time for our employees to do voluntary activities also in a way that makes sense to them, as people, but also as part of their role. But often in organisations, if that doesn't come as a strategic steer from the people who run the business, and that might be a really small business, you might not know what volunteering is going on. So if you don't know, you can always ask the question, and you might be surprised at the answer. You can think about that education stuff. So you can think about offering placements to students who are working towards T-level qualifications. You can also support young people, and especially underrepresented groups, through that employability agenda. So CV building, careers guidance, careers days, interview skills. In a previous business that I ran, we ran a stray dog kennels, boarding kennels, and we were a rehoming centre. And we had a care farm there for children with special educational needs and disabilities, adults with additional needs, also like dementia. And one of the things we used to do was set up employability days, and they do take some planning, but we offered them free of charge as part of our social value contribution, where we helped children aged around 15, 16, who were looking at apprenticeships versus further education, to think about what a land-based job would look like in an urban setting. So what would it mean to work in a kennels like ours? What would it mean to work on a care farm like ours? What would an employer be looking for? What are the types of pathways into that career? Is that an apprenticeship? Is that further study? Is that something else? What are the roles types? What are the role levels, etc., etc. And although it takes a bit of planning, actually it was really good to be able to help young people to see roles that might be on offer that aren't necessarily easy to see, and especially to underrepresented groups. We worked specifically with children with learning disabilities or additional needs, young people who had mental health challenges, etc. So we were focusing on very specific underrepresented groups, but actually you can support any young person with an employability agenda in a way that makes sense to your business. And that might be something like, I'm going into a local school to deliver careers advice. There is a platform called Inspiring the Future. If you're interested in supporting education, either through governance or through careers advice, careers days, etc., you can find out more and build a profile under Inspiring the Future. It's all free of charge. That's how I found both my governance role and my current trustee role, and it's how I find out about schools' career days, where I go and talk about having a career in procurement. So, and if I can make procurement sound interesting to young people, then I reckon we can do it with every career that there is. You can also work with local contractors, smaller organisations, voluntary sector organisations. No matter how big or small your spend is, where you spend it and how you spend it is a part of your social value contribution. You can think about how diverse your supply chain is, and you can also think about your environmental impact. So you can think about what waste you have, how you manage your waste, how you manage resources such as water, energy, etc., and how you can do so more efficiently as well. I will put the name of that website in the chat as well. And yeah, you can, it's a good point. If you want to do work with schools around careers, you can link up with your local careers hub through the Careers and Enterprise Company. That's come out of the chat today, so hopefully everyone can see that. I will, in fact, what I'll do with the Inspiring the Future, I'll pop it in the email that comes out to you, because I'll just need to go and find it. So I'll make sure that it comes out in the slide deck and the follow-up email as well to everyone. And just to finish off before we open up for some questions, there's something called the National TOMS framework. And it stands for Themes, Outcomes and Measures. That's what TOMS stand for. And under the themes, you will have overarching strategic themes that an organisation is looking to pursue. So that might be around job creation, job retention, for example. That might be around environmental sustainability. Underneath the theme, you'll have outcomes. So the objectives or goals that an organisation is looking to achieve that will contribute to that theme. So you might have under job creation as a theme, you might have new jobs or job retention as a part of that specific contract. So I'm bidding for this contract. If I win it and I'm not the incumbent, how many jobs might I create for that contract? If I win it and I am the incumbent, how many jobs might I retain for that contract? That kind of thing. How many of those jobs are 100% focused on that contract? How many are 50% or more focused on that contract? So that's an outcome, new employment or retained employment. And then the measures part of the TOMS is those measures that are used to assess whether those outcomes have been achieved. If you go to the local government association website, you will find the TOMS, and you can see all of the themes, all of the outcomes and the measures around it as well. You will, depending on the organisation that you're bidding for, it might be that they're using the TOMS to ask you about your social value contribution, in which case it should be very clear what the themes are, what the outcomes are, and what the measures will be that will be used. It might be that you're asked to define the measures of that particular TOM that you are contributing to. It might be that that is through an organisation called the Social Value Portal, but not always. The TOMS can be used by any organisation that want to, generally local government type organisations, but not exclusively so. And it will sometimes be through the Social Value Portal, but it might not always be. And the themes and outcomes and measures are not in operation everywhere. So it's just to make you aware that they exist, and so that you recognise them if you do see them in a bid in which you're active. The only other thing I really wanted to say was that it can be, really difficult, I think, to do this on your own. Sometimes it can feel really challenging to know where to start. There is a slide in the deck that will come out to you with all of my contact details on, the Go for Growth contact details, and a way of getting to helpful resources that we've got that could be useful for you. And of course, our message is you are not alone. Go for Growth is here to help. We are fully funded by our public sector clients. And so all of the support that we offer, including things like this webinar today, is offered free of charge. So there is no cost barrier to accessing any of the support that's on offer from Go for Growth. So if you'd like to stay in touch with us so you can find out more about those things that are there that could be useful, please do use the link in the slide deck to sign up to our newsletter. It comes out monthly. We don't spam. And of course, under GDPR, the General Data Protection Rules, you can opt out at any time. We try to only send out really useful communications wherever we can. So please feel free to stay in touch with us if you would like to. And now I'll just open up to questions and I'll stop sharing. We've got a few minutes left. Let me see what we've got. Oh, I'm so sorry. Somebody said they contacted us by email but didn't get a response. I am really sorry about that. That's not like us at all. If you want to drop me an email, I'll pop my email address in here now. Please feel free to email me and I'll make sure that we come back to you straight away. That's my email address. I'm ever so sorry if you've emailed us and didn't get a response. That's definitely not our MO. We try to respond to everybody that comes through to us. But my apologies for that. So please do get in touch. Yes, everyone will get a copy of the slides and a video of the webinar as well. Both will come out. And I'll include in there the link to Inspiring the Future as well. I'll just make a note of that so I don't forget. And all of that will come out. So we are Tuesday today, within 48 hours. So by end of business on Thursday, you should have had both the slide deck, the video, and in that email, a link to Inspiring the Future. But please feel free to ask any more questions that you've got. If you would, you'll see on the slide deck when it comes out, I've got an open calendar. So if you want to book directly into my calendar for a 30-minute Teams session, for a coffee and a chat about anything to do with social value, procurements, your growth, whatever it is, my door is always open. So please do feel free to get in touch. And hopefully that has been useful. I know it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour at a pretty high level, but we are here to help. So if we can be of any more assistance, please do get in touch. And all that remains for me to say is thank you ever so much for carving out some time today. We really appreciate you joining me this morning, and hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar very soon. Thank you ever so much. Have a good Tuesday.